الهوا
سوا طول ما بيبعدنا المكان.
سوا على الهوا من ميشيغان وواشنطن.
من يوم اللي اتكون يا وطن الموج كنا سوا، لا يوم اللي بيعتب يا وطن الغيم رح نبقى سوا.
من ميشيغان on WNZK 690 AM ومن واشنطن on WDMV 700 AM.
سوا في الهوا والهمين الساوية.
سوا على الهوا يأتيكم عبر أثير إذاعة
صباح الخير أمريكا.
لما نكون سوا يا حياتي سوا، دايبين بالهوا ما تعدي الساعات.
بكل خير ومرحبا بكل الذين انضموا إلينا في هذه الفترة الصباحية. سوا على الهواء من ميشيغان وواشنطن. مرحبا بكل مستمعينا في ميشيغان، وينزر، كندا، توليدو، اوهايو، شيكاغو، نيويورك، ومن كل انحاء امريكا، من واشنطن، فيرجينيا، ومع كل الذين انضموا الينا في هذه الفترة الصباحية. صحفية أسترالية تصف الوضع السوري من الداخل، وإلى أي مدى استخدم النظام السوري الأسلحة الكيماوية. تتضارب القصص والروايات حول الصراع القائم داخل الأراضي السورية بين مؤيد ومعارض. الصحفية الأسترالية تريسي شيلتون كانت شاهد عيان على بعض الأحداث الأخيرة وما أثير عن استخدام النظام السوري للأسلحة الكيماوية ضد الشعب الأعزل. كذلك أوضاع القوى المتناحرة داخل الأراضي السورية. سوا على الهواء من ميشيغان وواشنطن مع ليلى الحسيني، ويرافقني هذا الصباح الصحفي ريح حنانية من شيكاغو. في ضيافتنا كما أشارت الصحفية الأسترالية تريسي شيلتون، وسينضم إلينا لاحقا الدكتور عبد المجيد قطرنجي. تعمل تريسي شيلتون كصحفية ومراسلة تغطي مناطق النزاعات بالشرق الأوسط منذ عام 2009 لموقع جلوبال بوست الإخباري. سبق للصحفية أن غطت الثورة الليبية ولحظات القبض على الرئيس الليبي السابق معمر القذافي. أعمالها الوثائقية الصحفية بالصوت والصورة تم تداولها من قبل محطات إعلامية كبيرة كمجلة تايم وقناة الجزيرة والبي بي سي والCNN وقنوات ومواقع أخرى. الدكتور عبد المجيد قطرنجي دكتور جراح في جامعة ميشيغان ستيت ونائب للجمعية السورية الأمريكية الطبية في ميشيغان، والتي تقوم بتقديم المساعدات الطبية للمتضررين في الأحداث المؤسفة في سوريا. الدكتور قطرنجي أيضا حاصل على البكالوريوس في الأدب والعلوم السياسية، متخصص في سياسة الشرق الأوسط، وحصل على درجة الدكتوراه في عام 1999. نأمل أن ينضم إلينا الدكتور عبد المجيد لاحقا. طبعا أكد لنا الدكتور عبد المجيد أنه سيشارك في البرنامج هذا الصباح. نرحب بجميع مداخلاتكم عبر الاتصال المباشر أو عبر صفحات التواصل الاجتماعي. البرنامج يبث لمستمعين في ميشيغان، توليدو، أوهايو، وينزر، كندا. بإمكانكم الاستماع على الموجة المتوسطة WNZK 680 AM. أيضا بإمكانكم الاستماع على الموجة المتوسطة في مناطق واشنطن، فيرجينيا، ميريلاند على WDMV 700 AM. الآن بإمكانكم الاستماع للبرنامج من أي هاتف على الرقم 702-489-0120 702-489-0120. ونتلقى اتصالاتكم مباشرة من داخل أمريكا على الهاتف 248-557-3300. للاتصال عبر سكايب من كل أنحاء أمريكا، أيضا US Arab Radio. وبرنامجنا شيق هذا الصباح سنستعمل اللغتين العربية والإنجليزية لإشراك معظم مستمعينا هذا الصباح. Conflicting story come through mainstream media about the conflict inside Syria, both from supporters and opponents of the regime. Today's US Arab Radio will discuss the current situation inside Syria, and we have great guests to speak about the topic. Australian journalist Tracy Shelton, Global Post senior correspondent, was an eyewitness to some of the recent events in Syria, including the possibility of chemical weapon usage by the Syrian regime against civilian and opposition fighters. Also, with us will be later on, we hope to, Dr. Katranji will join us later on today. So Al Hawa from Michigan and Washington, this is Layla Husseini and my co-host from Chicago, journalist Ray Hanania. Good morning, Ray.
Hey, good morning, Layla. How are you?
How are you, Ray? I can hear you very, very, very well.
It sounded like Arabian Idol in the beginning with all that love music and stuff, you know?
Thank you, Ray. Ray, welcome to Sawa Al Hawa Show. This is the first time you've been here with us today.
Yes, and we need to have you join us on Radio Ballady on Friday. It's a lot of fun.
I know. I keep listening to you and Ali. That's you're doing a great job, guys.
Yes, and I listen to you because I love the music.
All right.
All right, well, we have a great guest on. Tracy Shelton is she's won a number of awards. She's based in Syria right now. She writes for this international, Boston-based international news group called Global Post, which you could go online and visit. I believe it's globalpost.com if you want to read some of the stories that are published there. And, she's been in a war zone over the years, and it's earned as a videographer, as a photographer, and as a writer. And she recently won a very important award, the 2013 George Polk Award, which is huge for her video news reporting for the series Inside Syria, which detailed the tragedy of life in the civil war that's going on right now. She's won a number of other awards. She's also, I think she made her mark, in terms of Middle East journalism when she was in Syria in Sirte during the capture of Muammar Gaddafi. And I saw some of her articles and her photos and her videos, and they've appeared in publications like Time, the Al Jazeera, CNN, and BBC. So, Tracy, can you hear us on the line?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great. It's great to hear you with that beautiful British accent. But see, you're not British, are you? You're Australian.
Australian, yeah. I've been away from Australia for a while, though, so maybe my accent's not so strong.
We love Australia. It's just so far to get. It's just so far to get there.
Tracy, good morning. Go ahead, Ray.
No, go ahead. And Tracy, of course, Layla Al-Husseini is with us also, the host of the show. Tracy, tell us a little bit about, first of all, a little bit about your background. I gave you some, but I mean, how long have you been a journalist? Why did you get into it, and why did you pick the Middle East?
Well, I actually started in Cambodia quite a while back. I stumbled into it. I'd always wanted to do something that would make a difference in with my life. But I'd always thought more along the lines of aid work or something like that. And then I stumbled into photography, and it sort of led from there into realizing that journalism is a really effective way of making a difference and really getting important information out to the public. So I began that in Cambodia, and later moved into the Middle East and kind of stayed. It wasn't really my plan to base myself here, but yeah, it's almost 4 years now, I guess, and yeah.
And if you're going to cover a war zone, unfortunately, the Middle East is probably the best place to be because there's always a conflict there. It's never ending. It's disastrous. But you are at the heart of the Middle East conflict right now in Syria, where we saw Israel recently attack the Syrian targets. This conflict has been going on now, about almost 2 years, I think. So many people have died. It must be tough, to work in a place like Syria. What's it like, and what are you seeing there?
Yeah, it is tough. It's really depressing, actually. It's just over 2 years now, as you said. It's just been constant killing. There's more than 70,000 people, and a lot of them are civilians that have died during the conflict so far. And it doesn't really seem there's an end in sight. It just keeps on escalating. We've had, as you mentioned, the Israeli strikes, so it's becoming more international players are getting involved now, and also the chemical weapons allegations that have come out lately. So it is just going from really bad to even worse.
Well, part of the big problem is, and I think, Layla, you'd agree that, so many Americans, they're the most educated people in the world, but the least educated about the world. It's like, whatever they get on TV, that's their understanding. And if the media doesn't report on it, they don't know anything about it. So this whole Syrian thing for 2 years has been a big question. I don't think most Americans get it. But as soon as Israel invaded Syria, that's what they're used to. Attacked Syria, that's what they're used to. If you had to explain this conflict to a typical American, Tracy, what would you say is happening in Syria today?
Well, I think what a lot of people don't realize now after so long is that it did begin as a revolution. It started largely in the universities with young people who wanted democracy and wanted change and just wanted the government to change or to a better system, basically. But now we see so much of that extremists because as the fighting has gone on, it has become very sectarian. You have the ruling party is mostly dominated by the Alawi minority, who are a Shia offshoot, and then you have the majority of the population as Sunni. So that has played a big part in the media, in that it is kind of becoming a bit sectarian in certain aspects of the revolution. But there is still a secular element to the opposition parties as well. There are still people that are fighting for democracy, but yes, it's also become a fight for Islam as well now, a fight for an Islamic government by many of the opposition groups. So it's very complicated.
You described your coverage dating the tragedy of life in a civil war. Do you see what's going on in Syria as a civil war or revolution?
I think there are elements of both. As I said, it very much at the beginning it was very much a revolution, and there are those elements are still there, but it has become a civil war in terms of as other groups are coming in and taking advantage of the revolution and have jumped on board. It has now become the many different aspects actually of the opposition are fighting for different things now.
And it should be important to ask this question, Tracy. Obviously the government doesn't they don't encourage journalists and coverage. Have you had problems with the government? Have they given you any hassles? Are they aware that you're there? And what's that situation? Because so many journalists I know have been kind of hassled by the government. Not so many by the rebels or the activists out there, but there is a little fear of the government. Have you had any of those issues at all? Or? And
if I have to add to the question, Tracy, did you get into Syria? How did you get into Syria? By approval of the government? That you did have a visa? Because this is an issue for some journalists. If they enter Syria by the approval of the government, somehow I've been told that they have to cover to the side of the government. How do you see this?
Yeah, I applied for a Syrian visa, but I'm still waiting. They haven't told me no, but they haven't told me yes either, so I think it's an endless wait. So I haven't managed to enter with a visa yet on the government side.
But you have been there, yes. Right? In Aleppo?
Yeah, I have been entering. Well, in the early stages, a lot of the border areas were still operated by the government. So it was a matter of actually sneaking in past the government checkpoints, and it was quite difficult to enter the country at that stage. Now it's a lot easier because the opposition groups hold quite a large area along the Turkish border, so it's very easy. You can actually enter legally now through the Turkish government and into the rebel-held area. So that's what I do mostly these days.
And how do you hear about the fighting? Just to cover this would be Syria is a huge country. Do you have access to travel throughout the whole country? And these aspects of actually doing your job, in addition to what you report on, I think is fascinating to people because they take it for granted that they think it's like covering the White House or something. You walk in, someone calls you, hands you a press release. In this case, you got to hear word of mouth, right? Or you hear some news off the internet, and then you try to rush to the spot. Give us an idea of what you're doing and what you're seeing.
Yeah, it certainly is very different here. I find just being in Syria most of the time, or as much as I can, I'm pretty much there 90% of the time in country. So when things happen, sometimes you're actually there at the time. Other times you hear about things and you try to get to the location. If you can't, I have a lot of contacts now after a year in Syria. I have contacts right throughout different areas, so yeah, I'll often be contacting them by internet or by phone if it's ever up, which the phone lines are usually down. But yeah, anyone in the area, find out what's happening on the ground. Is it possible to get there? Yeah, that's pretty much how we have to operate.
So we do have so many questions, Ray, but we're going to get a quick commercial break. This is a program today brought to the listener by the sponsorship of attorney Jumana Kairouz, and you can go to www.jumanakairouz.com to find more about her legal work. Quick commercial break, we will be back. سوا على الهوا سوا على الهوا يأتيكم عبر أثير إذاعة
صباح الخير أمريكا
من يوم اللي اتكون يا وطن الموج كنا سوا.
للمحامية جمانة كيروز باع طويل وناجح في قضايا الإصابات الشخصية وحوادث السيارات، حيث أن مكتبها يضم أكثر من 60 موظف وباقة ضخمة من المحامين المتخصصين في هذه القضايا. سجلها يتكلم عنها، وهي التي تفوقت بإنهاء أكثر من 99% من قضايا موكليها بالنجاح الكامل الذي مكنهم من الحصول على عشرات وعشرات الملايين من الدولارات سنويا. الاستشارة مجانية، والالتزام بمصالحكم من أهم أولوياتها. للمزيد من المعلومات يرجى الاتصال بالرقم 248-557-3645 248-557-3645.
Welcome back, Sarah Al-Hawa from Michigan and Washington. I have with me co-hosting the radio program today, Ray Hadania, and also we have Tracy Shelton. Tracy, being an eyewitness to the events in Syria, who you believe is fighting on the field? You spoke in your reports about targeting women and children. Can you please tell us some more about the reality of what is happening there?
Basically, I think with the era of
Ray, I think we have a little bit problem with the sound here.
I'm catching some issues also. Do you want to just call us right back?
Right.
Tracy, we're going to call you right back, and Layla, you'll call me back too.
Sure.
Okay, no problem.
All right.
Let's have a quick commercial, please. We'll call back. سوا على الهوا سوا على الهوا يأتيكم عبر أثير إذاعة
صباح الخير أمريكا.
من يوم اللي اتكون يا وطن الموج كنا سوا.
If you get into a car accident, how will you pick up the pieces when you can't work, when the bills pile up? Who will help you? Call 866-YOUR RIGHTS.
I called Jumana. She took care of everything. My medical bills, lost wages, and even a large settlement. I am Jumana Kairouz, and I assure you that my team will not stop until you get the most for your rights.
If you've been in a car accident, call Jumana. 866-YOUR RIGHTS.
Well, I guess we are doing a great job by Skyping you on Chicago, Tracy in Turkey, Washington, D.C. All this connecting is really not easy job to do. So, Tracy, can you help me well right now?
Yes, I can. No problem.
So you've heard my question before the break, right?
Yes, okay. I did. I'll just continue for the answer to that question. In my experience, there are just so many civilians that have been targeted in Syria. particularly with air raids. They seem to be very indiscriminate. The ones that I've witnessed, I rarely saw any military targets, but I always saw women and children killed and injured. It's been a terrible war, and no one has escaped it. Even families that haven't lost family members or have managed to somehow hold on to their homes, it's still that constant fear that they have to live with all the time, that they could be next, that their loved ones could be next.
Do you get a sense that anything's changing there? Is the government losing control? It seems to be going back and forth, and I just wonder right now, what do you think is happening between the government and the activists, the rebels?
Yeah, I think it is very much back and forth. There doesn't seem to be any particular side that have the upper hand at the moment. About the only thing that's changed in recent months is the rebels have managed to get some more anti-aircraft weaponry, so the air raids have slowed down. I have noticed that quite significantly. But other than that, yep.
What was the response you've heard from people about the Israeli attack? I mean, on the one hand, I'm sure that, the people have wanted the U.S. to step in to do something with the Assad regime, but I'm not sure everybody's really excited about the Israelis getting involved, because some people think it's going to help Assad, but, others are thinking everything and anything will help change. What do you hear from people? What do you sense is going on in terms of the reaction to the Israeli attacks?
It's mostly been confusion. People didn't really know what was going on. I spoke to a few people in Damascus who said that the government didn't make any statement to the civilians there. And also Israel that's the second bombing, they haven't actually claimed responsibility directly yet either, although they also haven't denied it. So it has been a bit of confusion surrounding it, and I wouldn't say anybody's particularly celebrating it and sort of saying this is great, but at the same time they haven't been against it either. It's just no one's really taken a side yet, or I think most people are just waiting to see what happens next.
Do you think it helps or hurts Assad?
Well, definitely it has to hurt. Having airstrikes against major military targets is going to have to hurt. But yeah, at the same time, Iran were very quick to step up and say, if Israel are going to get involved, then we're going to step up our help. So yeah, you do have that reverse effect as well.
Yeah, and I would think that, my opinion is that it sounds like these Israeli airstrikes are going to kind of reinforce the Assad regime, because they've been trying to argue for the last 2 years that, any attack against them undermines the Palestinian cause, strengthens the Israelis. Not that they've done anything in the last, 65 years to even remotely, liberate any Palestinians, at least not since 65 years ago, in the very beginning with al-Khawfi. But my sense is that these Israeli attacks are going to strengthen Assad in his fight against the rebels. What do you think, Layla?
I totally agree with you, Ray, and I've heard it from so many people. This attack will benefit only the Assad regime based on the really why it's happening right now, and really it's some people, they do believe that it's the only benefit will be for the Assad regime. Tracy, I do have a question. You covered the tragedy in Aleppo, and I got so many questions from our listener and on Facebook, social media. So can you describe to us, what did you see, what you eyewitnessed in Aleppo? It was a really tragedy. What I've heard, it's totally, in some area, it's being destroyed completely. Can you tell us what did you see in Aleppo and Idlib, please?
Yeah, well, in Idlib as well, there's entire cities that are basically flattened, like Murat Aman. Some other villages as well have received just terrible amounts of damage. Aleppo, the airstrikes were just devastating there. Also the Scud missile attacks. It hasn't been 100% identified as Scud missiles, but whatever they were, they destroyed entire blocks, like 5-6 blocks, just one missile, and hundreds of lives lost. It's just devastating.
Tracy, did they use the Air Force, the government? I want to hear from you as an eyewitness. Did you see any evidence that of course we're seeing the government is using through media, but you've been there. Tell us. I mean, I would like to our listener hear from you. Did you see in your eye that there is evidence that the government used the Air Force against their own people?
All the time. Before, when I was in Aleppo, as I mentioned briefly earlier, in about the last month or so, because the rebels have better anti-aircraft weapons, it has slowed down a lot, particularly in Aleppo. But a few months back, every day you'd see the planes coming over, you'd hear the explosions. I've been very close to a number of explosions by helicopter and by plane, seeing the planes themselves dropping bombs. There's no question. Even not just in Aleppo, but in other villages as well. I've seen the helicopters shooting bullets into villages and dropping bombs, and it's definitely been happening, and on a large scale.
How do you see the Free Army responding to that? Do you think it is both sides who's doing this, or particularly the regime is really the most he's committing this?
To my knowledge, the opposition forces don't have access to aircraft, and certainly not to this extent to be performing air raids, and they have also been on the opposition-held territory, not on the government side. They, of course, are sending back missiles and other kinds of weapons. They now have access to tanks and bigger weapons than they had before. So, yes, they are sending them back to the government side. But they don't have access to the same kinds of weapons that the government have.
And just to remind everybody that's listening, I'm Rayhan Ania. Layla Hosseini's on the line, and our guest is Tracy Shelton. She's a journalist associated with and a correspondent for the Boston-based international news group Global Post. You can go online, I believe, and at globalpost.com to read some of the stories there. And Tracy, you're in Turkey now on the border of Syria, or you're in Syria?
I'm on the border now. I actually came to Rahanli to investigate the chemical weapon because a lot of the survivors were sent to a hospital in Rahanli. So, yeah, I came out to investigate this.
Can you share anything that you found about it? I mean, we've heard reports of chemical weapons being used. Was it extensive? I mean, what do we know about it, or what have you seen to confirm or even question some of the reports?
Well, I investigated 2 incidents quite thoroughly. I went to the sites and met with the doctors, the victims, and rescuers as well. And there was obviously some chemical used in both of these events. But it wasn't. It didn't seem to be sarin gas. Also in Rahanli, the doctors tested the blood for nerve gas, and it came up negative to the patients they had there. But they are doing further tests to determine what kind of gas it is, because it was definitely some kind of chemical reaction. These people didn't have injuries; they had a chemical reaction. They couldn't breathe. They had problems with their sinuses, with headaches, with vomiting. So they're definitely using something, but it wasn't to the same scale as these internationally banned chemical weapons like sarin gas or similar weapons that people are in great fear of because the regime have access to this. In the 2 instances that I looked at, there were 3 fatalities in Aleppo, and in the Idlib instance there was 1. So it wasn't anywhere near the same scale it would be if they were using these internationally banned chemical weapons.
Yeah, when they talk about chemical weapons assaults, there probably people are remembering back to when Iraq and Iran were fighting. And I think Iraq, and I'm not sure if the Iranians did, but they may have used chemical weapons against soldiers, which was very devastating. But it sounds like the reports we're getting is that maybe some minor, small amounts of chemical weapons were used, but it doesn't seem like anybody can really kind of pin that down.
Yeah, there hasn't been anything solid. It's interesting, the blood tests in Turkey have come up negative on the initial test. I'm still very interested to see what the chemical it is that they're using, because if they are trying out small amounts, this may be leading up to something bigger.
Yeah, that would be, I mean, there is a fear that, when you're kind of desperate and you're caught in a corner, I mean, unlike any of the other situations we've seen, Assad remains in power, even though his power is very weak, I think. He still does have control. His wife isn't buying, expensive shoes anymore in European markets, but and their travel seems to be restricted. But he's managed to survive now 2 years, and that's kind of discouraging, for the rebels who are trying to unseat them. As much as they've been successful in building their base, there doesn't seem to be an end to it. So there is a fear that, maybe as this situation worsens, they're going to just say, well, heck with it. Let's just do anything or everything, and chemical weapons would be one of the ones that we fear the most. Have you heard reports of any of the rebels using chemical weapons at all? And I know there's a small group of extremists that are trying to take advantage of all this. Have you heard anything in that aspect at all?
There was one in Aleppo. There was one instance that I was trying to get to the site, but I couldn't. At first, I was told it was government-held territory, and people were saying that it may have been the rebels. And then they told me no, it was rebel-held territory. But I couldn't actually get to the site. But the footage I've seen on the television was clearly not a rebel hospital. It was much more equipped than that. It seemed to be on the government side, and then you had, just in the last few days, one of the UN investigators had come out and said the rebels were using chemical weapons. But I don't think it's to any greater extent than the ones that I've investigated as well. It seems that from the footage I've seen in the hospitals, there seem to be similar symptoms in these victims. And also with the UN report, they came back quite quickly and released an official statement saying they actually didn't have evidence. So what I think may have happened there, that first statement too, the UN investigator had said it was based on testimony. And as soon as I visited any of these sites, the first thing you get, even from doctors, is, oh yes, it's sarin gas. But then when you look into it, you start to see that, no, they don't actually have evidence of this. It's just an assumption. So I think that may have happened also with these allegations that the rebels are using chemical weapons.
Tracy, I want you to go deep into one of the video I've looked through, you've sent to us, and I guess it was so interesting to me to see some of people really in the hospital were shaking and some white things coming out of their mouth. Can you describe to us what did you see exactly?
Yes, they were. The biggest thing was breathing problems, and that was the ones that that died from respiratory failure. So that was the ones who had the biggest effects. There were also tremors; they were not conscious. Some of them for 2 or 3 days, but the ones who survived fully recovered after 5 days. So with a lot of the symptoms do seem to mimic sarin gas, but if it was sarin, then there wouldn't be any survivors, or very, very few survivors. So whereas with this, whatever chemical this was, most of the people did survive, although the effects were horrific.
So what do you think, Ray? What was the thing using against them?
Well, that's part of the problem. It's been so hard to get information. The government has been around. I mean, they're not weakening. They still have some controls, and it's dangerous for journalists to be there. I mean, it's dangerous for Tracy. I'm concerned for her because, I don't want to do it. I don't want us to give too much detail about Tracy. I'm sure that's a fear you have, Tracy. As a journalist there, but it's very difficult. I just don't know, and I don't trust, the reporting that we're getting here in the United States. I prefer to trust, outside news sources, because the mainstream media in this country, and I was part of it for 30 years. I just, there's kind of like this not wanting to be too critical of Israel or too critical of the United States, and I just don't know if they're really telling us the whole story because of the political implications from sometimes telling those whole stories. All of a sudden we see this, the Israeli attack, and everybody's interested in that, and we're getting a lot of coverage in the mainstream media.
Ray, I'm sorry. Let's start with our listener also been calling over and over. Can we take this call, please? I mean, all right.
Sure, bring them in.
Sawal Hawa from Michigan and Washington. Good morning.
Good morning, Mrs. Layla. My name is Dr.Katranji. I just have a quick few questions for Mrs. Tracy.
Sure.
Sure, Mrs. Tracy, now, a chemical substance is a substance that can be delivered using munitions and the special device cause death and harm. Would you say that people coming in with yellowish skin, liver failure, these are 4 or 5-year-old patients, they are not being subjected to chemical weapons?
Yeah, as I said, there's definitely the reactions that are coming through are from some kind of chemical, because these people aren't injured. They're having a chemical reaction to whatever they've been exposed to. But the effects of it, and not to the extent that they would be if it was one of these banned chemical weapons that were listed on the Convention of Against Chemical Weapons. Some of the experts I talked to suggested other lesser, like crowd control gases or chemicals like even tear gas. In my experience, it was from the events that I've seen, it was something definitely heavier than tear gas, but lesser than these major chemicals that people are most in fear of.
And you're saying you talked to the doctors to ask them about...
are consistent with phosphorus bombs, which was video verification. What do you think of that report?
Oh, yes, I've heard many reports the same, actually, that phosphorus has been used. I don't have a lot of doubt that is actually being used. Yeah, I guess the thing with that the red line Obama was talking about, and I think he didn't make that very clear when he stated it, he was talking about these internationally banned weapons, like sarin gas, mustard gas, these chemical weapons that are capable of killing a lot of people en masse.
Thank you so much, sir, for your point. Tracy, we're going to get a quick commercial break, and then we're going to go back with more question about Obama's administration really red lines and killing journalists in Syria. And I got one question through Facebook said, Tracy, can you describe the group is fighting on ground? Did you see the group is fighting currently in the ground? We'll be back after a quick commercial break.
سوا على الهواء سوا على الهواء يأتيكم عبر أثير إذاعة
صباح الخير أمريكا
من يوم اللي اتكون يا وطني الموج كنا سوا.
للمحامية جمانة كيروز باع طويل وناجح في قضايا الإصابات الشخصية وحوادث السيارات، حيث أن مكتبها يضم أكثر من 60 موظف وباقة ضخمة من المحامين المتخصصين في هذه القضايا. سجلها يتكلم عنها، وهي التي تفوقت بإنهاء أكثر من 99% من قضايا موكليها بالنجاح الكامل الذي مكنهم من الحصول على عشرات وعشرات الملايين من الدولارات سنويا. الاستشارة مجانية، والالتزام بمصالحكم من أهم أولوياتها. للمزيد من المعلومات يرجى الاتصال بالرقم 248-557-3645 248-557-3645.
Welcome back to Sawal Hawa from Michigan and Washington, and we do have another call away. Can we take the call quickly?
Sure.
All right. Good morning, Sawal Hawa from Michigan and Washington.
صباح الخير ليلى.
صباح النور.
بس اريد اقول لك
Yes.
حكام العرب لعدوين ياهم من دخلت اسرائيل هسه على سوريا، ليش هي اسرائيل ليش ما يعرفون اسرائيل هاي امنيتها تدخل على سوريا وعلى الدول العربيه؟ احلو لا، وينهم دول الخليج؟ وهذول الشيوخ وينهم؟
Okay.
احلو لا اختي.
Thank you so much, Habibti. We will ask. Okay. Ray, she was asking where all the leaders from Middle East when Israel attacked Syria. Where
they're in Dubai. They're having a hafla.
Okay, let me ask
a lot of great food, and they're buying Maserati sports cars.
But I have another question to our listener. Where is Assad regime from all of this? I mean, they did not respond back to Israel. I mean, there is so many questions.
Where's anybody? Where's the outcry from the Americans Americans, even here in this country, the Arab Americans aren't doing enough. But your question, Layla, I think it's a good one.
Right.
Syria has said that Israel's going to be punished, and I wonder if Tracy has any idea what she thinks that means, or is it just bluster and the usual rhetoric that we get from Arab governments? What do you think, Tracy? Are the Syrians going to do something? The Syrian regime going to do something against the Israelis? Do you see any evidence that they're doing anything?
I think at the moment they've kind of got their hands full within their own country, and
they can't do anything, can they? Right?
Yeah, they can't really afford to be taking on a war with Israel right now, and I think that's what Israel know, and that's probably why they've chosen now to make this strike. Is that I think they're kind of betting on the fact that they can't really do much in retaliation.
And in reality, can I ask you, that happened before, so it wasn't a war, it wasn't really anything going on in Syria, but Syrian regime did not respond back to that. How do you comment, Tracy and Ray, by that?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Ray, did you...
No, go ahead. I'm just going to say that you're talking about before this...
Right. So many times. I mean, there's so many attacks, by Israel. Syria did not respond once to that.
Right, but now they're more desperate. Assad is more desperate. Who knows? Just like the use of chemical weapons. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen any evidence of chemical weapons before this, but now he's more desperate. Maybe he'll use it, maybe he won't. We just don't know. But, Tracy, also, what about Turkey? Turkey at one point, it looked like they were breaking from Israel to put pressure on the Israelis. The Turks are Sunni. They don't like the Shiites or the threat of Iran, coming in to support Assad. What do you see happening? It looks like the Israelis are kind of co-opting the Turks, by finally, after years of complaining, giving them money to solve the killing of those 9 civilians on the boats that went to the Gaza a number of years ago. What's happening with Turkey? What are they doing?
Yeah, well, they have offered a lot of support to the rebels, but it's not official. They kind of close their eyes to a lot of the movement of weapons across the borders. So I think they have been giving quite a significant amount of support, but they're a little worried to get directly involved or really stand up and make a big stand. But
do they have a stake in terms of a minority constituency in Syria that they're protecting, a Turkish ethnic group in Syria that they're worried about, or is it just about regional politics?
No, I think it's more about regional politics. They also have quite a big interest on what's going to happen with the Kurds in Syria as well, and worried that it may play a part for the Turkish Kurds. Yes, but I think it's more just a general political interest for them.
And we've heard talk that Hezbollah is, going to, that the reason the Israelis claim that they attacked this site was because they claimed that these missiles were going to Hezbollah. It sounded like a big excuse to me because, I'm sure Syria has sent Hezbollah missiles before, and I don't understand why the Israelis suddenly find this need to do this, and it's not for the reasons that anybody would like them to do anything, but have you heard of or seen any evidence that Hezbollah has been active, or is it an affinity, people sharing the same political views that sometimes look like Hezbollah, or what is that all about? Do you see anything that, in terms of a buildup of Hezbollah troops in Syria?
Iranian troops, Tracy, or Iranian troops. I got this question.
Or Iranian, Iranian troops too.
Right. Probably a bit more in recent months, a bit more from Hezbollah. They have been fighting along the borders with the rebel groups with Syria. So they have been sort of stepping up a bit and getting a bit more involved. Iran, I hear reports all the time of Iranian soldiers, but I've never actually met one. Every time I ask, like a lot of the rebel groups will tell me, yes, there's so many Iranian soldiers that we're fighting against on the ground. But whenever I've asked them, have you ever captured any? Could I meet with a prisoner? Do you have any evidence? I've never actually managed to get any. So I can't really confirm whether that's true or not, but I do have a lot of reports, particularly that they're helping to train the Syrian soldiers, so the Syrian government soldiers.
Ray, let's take a quick call from our listener, and I have a question.
President Obama from Washington?
Yes, yes, and I have a question for President Obama. Your red line, about his red line, I mean, toward the chemical weapons. Some of our listeners, he said, really, red line is only applicable for a chemical weapon. Don't you think that red line, it should applicable also for killing civilian and using the air force against his own people? Let's take a quick call from here. Sawal from Michigan and Washington.
Good morning, Layla. Good morning, Ray, and good morning to your guest, Tracy Shelton. This is Adil calling.
Oh, good morning, Adil. How are you?
Good morning.
Good. How are you? I just have, as I was thinking, since Israel attacked Syria in the last few days, I think this attack was a serve kind of to the regime because as the regime is in its final stages, Israel doesn't want Syria to become a power or a military power. They want to destroy all of Syria's arsenal to the ground zero before they come back and rebuild after the regime falls. So I think this is one point that I think is to consider in this situation. My question to Tracy is, when the U.S. talks about the red line and okay, we will not intervene until Assad uses chemical weapons. I mean, people are dying in hundreds these days without chemical weapons, with Air Force. I mean, why not even Air Force protection? There has to be a trigger. And the other question is, the fighters the foreign fighters who are fighting with the opposition are very overhyped in the media. Can you tell us how big they are actually on the ground? Thanks.
Yeah, first, it's a very good point, and it's one that's as I've been researching the chemical weapons attacks, the one that so many Syrians have made to me, like, why is this such a big deal? They've been killing us with planes, with Scud missiles, with everything until now. So, why do people care so much about chemical weapons? It's not going to make a difference. No one helped us till now, so they're not going to help us after this. And I think it very much, the Syrian people, the Syrian civilians have lost faith that anybody's going to really intervene no matter what. So,
right.
So that's a very good point. And, but just on the foreign fighters, there definitely is a foreign fighter presence, but it isn't anywhere near as big as what it is hyped up to be in the media. There definitely are, and as the revolution carries on for longer, there are more coming in, but it's still very small scale. The majority are still very much Syrian fighters.
Yeah, I agree. I think this red line is just a lot of baloney from President Obama, trying to look like he cares about something, and he didn't care when fighter jets were strafing civilian areas and tanks were crushing people. Suddenly he says, there'd be a red line if they use chemical weapons. I don't think he even cares about the Syrians at all. I think he more is concerned that the use of chemical weapons might spill over into Israel. And I think his only concern is Israel. And I think Israel's only concern is Israel. They could care less, although I think they'd prefer a loser who's never done anything in 20 years, like Bashar al-Assad, or his father, who did a lot of great talking and did nothing, so then to have a new democracy or even the rebellions or disarray in Syria, they'd rather have Assad back in power because it serves their interests. And I think they're going to, I don't know, I think these attacks are intended to galvanize Arab anger against Israel so that Assad can maybe find a way to save himself.
I have another caller, Ray, quickly. caller. Oh, they dropped. I'm sorry. We're trying to take all the calls. The
mukhabarat censored it.
Tracy, let us talk a little bit about also Jabhat al-Nusra. I got this question, and also Al-Qaeda. Do you see groups where you did cover that there's a huge group from Al-Qaeda or Jabhat al-Nusra is fighting in the ground as well in Idlib and Aleppo?
Yeah, Jabhat al-Nusra definitely have a presence, and it's an increasing presence. And yeah, they are extremists. They've recently come out to say that they do have ties to Al-Qaeda. Yeah, so it is concerning. I think, especially internationally, it's concerning to people. But when you speak to other rebel groups, because they're very effective fighters. They're very well trained. They're very disciplined. So when they make an attack, it's usually quite successful. So they do basically punch above their weight. But there isn't a huge number of them, to be honest. When you look at how many different rebel groups there are, they do play a sort of fairly small role still.
Do you believe from what you saw or covered, do you see that Jabhat al-Nusra or Al-Qaeda, maybe they are attacking civilian as well? I mean, the question I got on Facebook, they said, do you see any evidence that they are attacking civilian or just attacking military, like related to the government?
To my knowledge, I've only really seen military attacks, and I think they have their hands full with military attacks. They can't really afford to be attacking Alawi villages or anything like this at this time. It doesn't mean that they're not going to, or they're not going to target people based on religion or based on race. And on a very small scale, this has happened. They do carry out executions when, according to them, like they do have their own like court where they will try people and execute them when they catch prisoners and things like this. So they're definitely not operating by international humanitarian standards. But from what I've seen, I haven't seen any large-scale attacks on civilians by the opposition.
I'm pretty sure that you are monitoring what's going on in Banyas and all these massacres. We got these horrible pictures about civilian from Sunni really being killed. I mean, I cannot really keep up with all these pictures anymore. So, any plan to cover this as well, Tracy?
Yeah, I've been looking into this myself. There was, in the last couple of days, I'm hoping to find out a little bit more detail about that. But yes, it does seem that it's a government-affiliated group have come into the town here and killed a lot of the civilians there in the Sunni population. And the reasons that are coming forward at the moment is because it is a Sunni village on the coastline, and they're worried that maybe weapons shipments or this sea access for the rebels is a dangerous thing. So that was why the initial attack happened. But I don't have any figures yet, any confirmation on how many people have been killed or what percentage are civilian or women or children. So, but I'm working on that at the moment.
Tracy, we have another caller. Quickly, we can get this call. Caller, please. Quickly.
Yes, good morning. This is Rafat from New York. Just my question, from the beginning it was a dream for a revolution. Huh? Now we talk about war. So, I don't know what's going on in this situation. There is any wish to find a right thing for our country, Syria? This is my question. Have a nice day. Thank you.
I think he's expressing frustration, don't you think, Tracy, that nothing's happened, right?
And what is the future? How do you see the future is going on? And I mean, where all of this it might lead as you are in the ground, Tracy?
I think it's getting worse all the time and getting harder to solve all the time. And when you speak to Syrians on the ground as well, you get that same frustration always, especially from these initial groups that were fighting for democracy and peaceful protests for democracy. They look now at what has happened to their revolution and what the country has become, and it's really sad. It's devastating for all the people of Syria. and I don't know what the end's going to be. I don't know how they're going to come back from here and build a democracy or build a functioning country anytime within the next 5 or 10 years. And the fighting still hasn't stopped yet. So it's not looking very good in the near future.
I guess my last question, Andre, I don't know if you have any more question to Tracy. I want to really to touch base on journalists who are targeted in Syria, journalists of different nationalities really been covering the event. Working for media related, maybe they relate somehow to the regime, or a freelance media, or maybe activists on different situations. So how do you see, who's killing the journalist simply, Tracy?
It's become more complicated as the time has gone on. At the beginning, it was the only thing we really had to fear was the government side. We were entering the country illegally, so they were in their rights to arrest us if we were captured. And many were. Some were released. Some have been missing until now. But in probably the last 6 months or so, the danger has now come from the opposition side as well. There's many criminal gangs operating among the opposition sides or in the opposition territories that have kidnapped people for ransom, even sold them on to the government or to other groups, and even the more extremist groups as well have been known to capture journalists for questioning. We don't really have any solid proof that anyone has been killed by opposition groups. There have been some incidents where they've targeted them for different reasons. So it's very difficult now for us to operate anywhere because you don't really know where the danger's coming from or who you can trust these days.
Tracy, listen, it's been a real pleasure having you on the radio show. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us via Skype. And we loved your accent, too. You know, I wish I could do that accent, but I keep thinking of ABBA and Dancing Queen, and, of course, they're from Sweden, but I don't know how they identified them so strongly with Australia. But we wish you a lot of safety. I know Layla and I want to make sure that, you know, you're in a war zone, and we hope that, you know, all kidding aside, that you're going to be okay and take care of yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Ray, and I have to apologize.
She can make fun of my Chicago accent if she wants. It's okay.
Tracy, I would like to thank you so much, and quickly, if you can also mention your website to our listeners so they can go back and read all your great coverage and article.
Yeah, thank you so much. So first there's globalpost.com, and also my personal website is tracyshelton.net.
And I have to apologize from all the callers been calling over and over. I think 1 hour show is not going to cover this topic at all, and I would like to, Tracy, if you have more time, really, we can go back and talk to you and open lines to our listener. Maybe they have more questions to you. Thank you so much, Tracy. Thanks, Ray. It was a great pleasure having both of you on Sawa Al Hawa from Michigan and Washington.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, Layla.
Thank you.
Welcome.
سوا على الهوا سوا على الهوا يأتيكم عبر أثير إذاعة
صباح الخير أمريكا
من يوم اللي اتكون يا وطن الموج كنا سوا.
If you get into a car accident, how will you pick up the pieces when you can't work, when the bills pile up? Who will help you? Call 866-YOUR-RIGHTS.
I called Jemana. She took care of everything. My medical bills, lost wages, and even a large settlement. I am Jemana Hughes, and I assure you that my team will not stop until you get the most for your rights.
If you've been in a car accident, call Jemana. 866-YOUR-RIGHTS.
على الهواء from Michigan and Washington. ليلى الحسيني تحيي كل من كان يتابعنا هذا الصباح. نعود إليكم غدا مع صباح الخير ميشيغان، والأسبوع القادم سيكون ضيف برنامجنا الدكتور عبادة الزحيلي في برنامج طبي استكمالا لبرنامجنا السابق. إلى اللقاء.